Welcome to another comparison video, following after our tank speculations and breakdown for Endwalker, this time featuring the caster role bracket. And while tanks haven't really changed that significantly, or at least not deviated much from their recent playstyle and feature set, for casters it is definitely another story, looking at the summoner in particular. But don't worry, we will cover most of the essential changes and break them down for certain categories. Starting with the overall utility distribution, which is the first category and basically remains identical to the recent system, except for the fact that the gap is being pushed further in Endwalker. Black Mage still having no party support as it had been the case for a very long time now, while Red Mage and Summoner get a shield effect added to their usual raising capabilities, and support they already had. Also, Red Mage's Embolden is finally being altered to also affect magical damage, which many Red Mage players, me included, have been waiting for. And when taking this whole department into personal utility and movement helper skills and systems, I really feel like Red Mage and Summoner are getting closer together, while playing totally different. But due to having reduced mana requirements to gain access to the melee combo and a whole bunch of freely cast spells plus adding another stack of Corp and displacement, the Red Mage is more mobile than ever, while the Summoner's kit is rewarded with much more alternation due to the different summoning stances, and mostly transferring all of the filler into useful instant cast spells, in opposition to the previously spam of Ruin 3. That still doesn't apply to the Black Mage, which I really like seeing, because the Black Mage had always been about making decisions in advance of mechanics to happen and always planning movement and positioning into your environment and battle schemes. Nonetheless, as they have added some new utility and movement helpers in Shadowbringers, they will follow on that path in Endwalker as well, introducing abilities like Amplifier to grant free Xenoglossy procs and some more rotational alignments overall. But to sum up this utility and movement topic, it really feels like they're sticking with the recently followed build. Summoner and Red Mage are the support-oriented caster jobs, while Black Mage could possibly become the strongest DPS again. Except for getting destroyed by Reaper, that could actually happen on the first weeks of the expansion. Still, when talking about damage, this may be an assumption that you can easily make, but according to some natural flaws in early balancing of any expansion, yes, even in Shadowbringers this had been the case, things might turn out as we're not expecting, so a well-geared Summoner or Red Mage could be able to beat Black Mages. But a square works with concrete numbers and potency values instead of 10 different scaling systems and set bonuses, legendaries, artifact power and many more variables. I guess it will line up correctly. I actually remember that in Shadowbringers, Red Mage and Summoner were quite on par and Black Mage had the upper hand it should have. On the other hand, when playing Summoner with the 5.1 changes, man, that actually became a bit of a mess, because it went out of hand and became super overpowered at that time. So when looking at that damage output and potential, at least we can track down Yoshi-P's plan to keep consistency with the recent meta, letting Red Mage and Summoner duel each other while Black Mage keeping the difficult to reach upper hand for players that are really into the casting game, which is the direction I'm absolutely fine with, except for the fact that maybe Black Mages could have Necromancy Raise or something like that, but maybe we will see something like this in the next expansion. Alright, last but not least, let us talk about the playstyle and overall class design and changes we're going to expect in Endwalker. First of all, I would actually separate the changes into certain impact levels, where Summoner can be seen as a whole rework of the job's identity and battle system from what we had recently, while Red Mage is going to see some significant changes to mana and resource management in general, and Black Mage basically gets really good improvements on its AoE rotation, the leveling experience and some new highlights like Paradox or the before mentioned Amplifier ability. So this actually means you will enjoy the upgrades and updates to the Red Mage and Black Mage if you already liked these jobs before. But playing a Summoner in Endwalker is a totally different story, because it basically becomes a new job, just taking with it very little pieces of the old Summoner. So let me try to pin down what you should know before making up your mind, starting with the Black Mage. Like explained earlier, the overall system of the Black Mage basically remains identical, so that hard casting remains a thing you have to take into account and plan into every possible rotation, and planning moves and attack sequences in advance will remain your natural habitat. The overall leveling experience gets amplified by the rework of Aspect Mastery that grants Black Mages the Astral Fire and Umbral Eyes affinities and theory way earlier now, and introduces the whole system in a much better way than just spamming fire upon having MP and switching to Ice when needing MP. Especially from my Black Mage beginner's guide, I learned that hopping into endgame logics totally confuses any new player. I'm sorry about that. Simply from the fact that it is a whole different story than starting into Thaumaturge or Black Mage. So I'm really looking forward to changes to this recently bad learning curve. Above that, using Flare and Freeze and all this back and forth of totally depleting your MP to get out some AoE stuff while being really cool at times, it felt flawed and has had been a last minute solution to make it work at all, instead of finding the correct answer to some serious AoE questions in the first place, which Square seems to be addressing with the so-called high spells like High Fire and also turning Foul into an instant cast plus Amplifier being a thing. So overall, Black Mage had been improved significantly in Shadowbringers already, and it seems that it's being improved again and again, while sticking to core mechanics that I really like, because they are clearly distinguish the job from others, so I'm really looking forward for an even better Black Mage in Endwalker. And the kinda same goes for Red Mage. While the overall system is kept identical, reducing the melee combo mana requirements to 50, while also adding tons of mana gain onto the instant cast finisher spells, this leads to a much more frequent access to the burst window that finally profits from Embolden, altering some openers already and making the whole build up much faster, and cooldown party alignments looks way cleaner with this form of a Red Mage. Above that, and like basically every other job, multiple stacks on spells seems to be a common addition to mostly utility spells in Endwalker that I do like a lot, because it gives you this perfect freedom to know, hey, I can keep some movement utility as backup as long as my second stack is still refreshing, which doesn't force you into keeping it on constant cooldown anymore. And yes, Magic Barrier and still being able to raise freely and getting another finisher being added to your melee and free cast combo in the form of Resolution is really cool. All this while being already boosted due to more frequent access to that combo, which leads to my final verdict. Red Mage will basically become Super Red Mage in Endwalker, with less casting and more sorrow. Alright. Summoner is definitely the toughest but also most interesting rework so far, because it literally is a rework, and while we may lose a job upon the release of Endwalker with the old Summoner and its damage over time effects, we definitely gain a new Summoner that feels like a Final Fantasy classic more than ever. First of all, we are receiving unlimited summons, like every moment of our rotation we are summoning, and even filler spells now feel way more accessible, like the change to Rune 3, which receives a shorter cast time now, working in the same way as healer spells do, granting space to weave OGCDs after their cast has been completed, and before you can use the next one to avoid clipping. Above that, they really try to make all summons feel different, which is perfectly shown in the Garuda summon, featuring a shorter recast timer on spells. In the same form we could witness that mechanic on the Machinist's Hypercharge window. I'm speechless, I'm really looking forward to this. Furthermore, summons like Phoenix or Bahamut don't seem to be so clunky anymore because they're not falling over their own feet, interrupting their own value with their spells. But now they just deal damage independent to their master's behavior, which is great to see. And while Mr. Happy has witnessed some delay and time framing happening while using Enkindle attacks, we're still talking about development footage that is subject to change. And while I could go into more detail on each new summoning stance in particular, let us just embrace what Endwalker is offering. Remind ourselves that it sounds and looks amazing so far, and I can't imagine it to be too simple, like some people on Reddit claim. Just simply from the fact that these stances are adjustable and you still have some very big decisions to make, like where to place Garuda's ground marked AoE, or when to use big cast time Ifrit spells, and much more. Especially when looking at the Shadowbringers summoner that right now feels super complex and busy for newcomers in particular, so these changes grant us the best and closest to classical summoner identity ever, while we have to track down the rotations and possibilities in Endwalker by ourselves. And I don't believe it will be boring at all. And even if it is, Black Mage and Red Mage look so good that you can always change to these, or fall in love with other jobs from other sub-roles. I'm really looking forward to these changes, and I hope that my little breakdown can help you out to make a decision, or like always, just test them out altogether, because they will play differently and variation is what makes this game so great, right? But for now, have a wonderful last weeks in Shadowbringers and see you guys on the moon with whatever job you may have chosen. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep loving Final Fantasy.